it's Jess. Welcome back. Today's video is going to be my April wrap-up. Today I have 9 books to talk to you about. All of them are for the Magical Readathon. Technically, one of the books I actually finished in May, but I'm just throwing it in here because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I do have vlogs for all of these books except for the one that I finished in May. I will leave those videos linked below so that if you want, you can enjoy those vlogs and also see maybe some more in-depth thoughts on all of these books. Because there are 9 books, I am going to try to keep this video moving. I'm gonna try not to talk too much. That's difficult for me, but I'm gonna start with my book club's pick for the month of April, which was Lonely Castle in the Mirror. And I really enjoyed this book. I rated it 4 stars. This is a translated novel from Japanese, and I believe it is intended to be a middle grade book. The main characters are all in middle school in here, and basically there is a group of 7 middle schoolers, and they have all stopped attending school for various reasons, but the main character, the POV that you're in, she has stopped attending school due to very severe bullying, which is leading to some mental health issues. And one day when she's at home, her mirror lights up, and when she touches the mirror, she is transported to a magical castle. When the kids get to the castle, they are told that if they find a magical key, that it will open up the wishing room and they will get to make a wish. That is the whole premise of the plot line for this book, but I would say that this is not a book that you read for plot reasons. This is definitely a book that you read for the thematic reasons. This is a book that very much discusses mental health, particularly depression, and this does include even suicidal thinking in here, so I want to put that very explicit content warning on this book. It is intended for a middle school audience, and I do think that it is age appropriate, but I also think that it is rather dark, and though the book handles these topics in, I think, a fantastic way, I do think that if you're recommending this book to a younger individual, make sure that they are in the correct headspace for this, because although I do think that this book is age appropriate, I also think that depending on the individual's mental status, this could be very triggering. I also think that this book could be very cathartic. There's a lot to be said in this book about how different people handle poor mental health. There are obviously 7 kids in this. They each have their own situation. They each have their own mental health issues going on, and they each react differently to their own situation, but also to the rest of the group. Some of them have positive reactions, some of them have negative reactions. This book also just has a really genuine depiction of at least one character's very severe depression. This book is at times very sad, and I think the tone of the book is quite melancholic, but I also think there's a lot of really heartwarming moments in here. There's a lot of bonding, there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of characters healing and working together, and though the overall tone is very melancholic, I also think there's quite a bit of hope in this novel, and I just really appreciated what the author had to say about depression and how it is a multifaceted mental health issue. It's never just a one factor thing. There's always so many things that influence people, and there's also so many things that need to come together to help someone heal. I just thought it was very real and very genuine, and I do recommend this book if you can handle the content matter. Next up, I want to talk about the 2 manga that I read last month. The first being Sailor Moon, the Eternal Edition, Volume 3. I honestly don't really need to discuss this very much. You know, I think we're all pretty familiar with the story of Sailor Moon and her guardians. This is very much a comfort read for me. I'm very, very familiar with the story of Sailor Moon. I rated this volume 4 stars, and honestly, I just had a great time with it. It's just really fun. I like it. If you like Sailor Moon, I think you'll like this. If you don't like Sailor Moon, I don't recommend this for you. Last month, I also read the collector's edition of Fruits Basket, Volume 11. This is the second to last volume in this manga, and I loved it. This is one of my favorite mangas, one of my favorite stories, period. I love this. This is technically a reread for me, although it has been at least 5 years since I read this. It's been quite a while. This is a series that follows Toru Honda. She is an orphan. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, she is camping out in the woods temporarily, and she thinks that she's in a public park, but it turns out she's actually on the Soma family property. The Soma family finds out that she's there. They're a very large and very rich and very powerful family. Toru is already sort of familiar with one of the members of the family because they go to school together. Once they find out that she's been camping out in the woods in their house, they end up actually taking her in and letting her stay with them. And then from there, she stumbles upon the Soma family curse, which is that some of them transform into animals. Obviously, the transforming into animals and the curse part of this is fantasy, but I would say that this is only slightly fantastical. It's definitely much more about the characters than it is about the magic. This is a series that is really just about love and all of the different forms of love that exist. It's about characters healing and being together. It is just so wholesome and heartwarming. There are parts of this story that make me cry every single time I read it. It just is something that lives in my heart. I'm actually wearing a Fruits Basket t-shirt today. I just love this series so much. I highly, highly recommend it. The next book that I want to talk about officially makes me a real fantasy reader. I can no longer be flamed for being a fake fantasy fan because I've officially finished The Lord of the Rings. I finished Return of the King last month, and again, I loved it. I loved this series so much. This is a big thing to say, but I want to make it clear I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but this book gave me an existential crisis and made me confront my mortality and basically sent me into a small depressive episode, which wasn't fun, but I love this book. I love this series. I just cannot stop thinking about this. I've thought about this book every single day since I have finished it. I already want to reread the series. I just simply don't have the time. I actually rated book 1 3 stars, book 2 4 stars, and I gave this book 5 stars. I do think, however, that on a reread, the first 2 books will go up at least a full star rating. I haven't given a plot synopsis of this. I'm not going to. It's The Lord of the Rings. Like, the themes in here of war and the effects that it has, of the collective human experience of mental health, of hope, of love, of overcoming evil. It is just so expertly written thematically and tonally. Now, I will say that this is not a perfect book. I did talk in my vlog about some problematic fantasy tropes that exist within this book, and I did want to say since then I have been told and also did some research that it was not Tolkien himself that came up with these problematic tropes. Problematic tropes have existed within fantasy for so very long, and so I'm not putting the blame for them existing on Tolkien, but I did want to make it clear that there are some problematic tropes within this book. They were definitely uncomfortable to read, and while I don't want to necessarily put the blame on Tolkien for creating those tropes, and this is an old book, obviously, but just because a book is old and someone didn't create those tropes doesn't mean that those tropes can't hurt people and can't perpetrate those tropes existing within a genre. I mean, this is still a 5-star read. I'm still a major fan. This has become one of my favorite series of all time. Like I said, I think about it every single day. So obviously I still have a lot of love for this, but I did also want to make that clear. I also talk about it a little bit more in depth in my reading vlogs. Next up, we have another third book in an adult high fantasy series, and that is The Empire of Gold. This is the third book in the Daevabad trilogy, and I finally finished it. Like I said, April was such a good reading month. This is also a 5-star read. If you like adult fantasy, I genuinely think you need to pick up this series. Truly you do. This is a multi-POV fantasy series, like I said, and in the beginning of the series, you follow primarily Nari. She is living in Cairo, Egypt. Nari is a con woman, and she basically pretends to heal people, which is admittedly not great. And one day she is doing a job and she's pretending to heal someone. She has a made-up ritual that she is using, and she accidentally summons a Jinn warrior named Dara, and he's like, guess what? You have magic. Oh, and by the way, you're coming with me to Daevabad. Once Nari gets to Daevabad, that's when the plot really kicks off. This is so extremely political. I love political fantasy. If you love political fantasy, you will love this. Like, it is so very excellent. When she reaches Daevabad, Nari also makes friends with a prince named Ollie, and there's just so much going on in here. None of the characters in this book are perfect. All of them have flaws, and those flaws have such a drastic effect on the plot. One of the things that I just truly love about this series, other than how excellent the politics and, like, honestly, this has phenomenal plotting. But one of the things that I really love is that all of the main characters in this book are quite flawed, and over the course of this series they do a lot of growing, but there's just something so satisfying when you read a book and all of the main characters feel so real, but at the same time, due to their flawed personalities, you just straight up never know what they're gonna do. At no point did any of the characters in this series act out of character. I always felt that all of their actions made so much sense, all of their thoughts made sense, everything they did felt so real and true, and it's what makes the characters come off the page. But at the same time, I could never predict what they were going to do. No matter how hard I tried, I could never predict what they were going to do. As the series progresses, it also gets more and more action-packed. So if you're sitting there thinking like, no, this is just a political fantasy, not for me, there's so much action. This book is 750 pages of just a hot mess happening, and every time I think things can't get worse, they do. This was a ride. This book was a ride in the best way possible. I loved it. I loved not knowing what was going to happen in the next chapter. It was just so exciting and so entertaining to read. I also think Shannon Chakraborty has such a fun writing style. It is so engaging and engrossing, and it's also funny. And I don't mean like funny haha, but just, she's just funny. She is. You're not going to sit there and like laugh out loud at any point, I don't think, but I think you are going to smile. I highly recommend this. You should definitely pick up this series. Okay, next up, I want to talk about Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This is a Greek myth retelling of Theseus and the Minotaur, but from Ariadne's perspective, and it is meant to refocus on Ariadne and the women in this story. And that's all I'm going to say about the plot line. This book was a little bit of a disappointment for me, but it is still a good book. The only reason this is a disappointment is because I thought that this was going to be a 5-star read, and even up until like the halfway point of this book, I still thought it was going to be a 5-star read. But it ended up being a 3-star read. Now, the thing is, I know that I'm in the minority here. I know the vast majority of readers have given this 4 and 5 stars. So if you are interested in Greek retellings, especially ones that focus on the women with themes of feminism in them, I do think that you could enjoy this. It just didn't live up to the hype for me, unfortunately. I think Jennifer Saint has amazing writing, though. There were definitely moments in here where if I had a bookstagram, I would have been like taking pictures and posting quotes. There's some really, really, truly beautiful writing in this book. While the pacing was good in here and the writing was fantastic, and I did like the themes in here, basically what my issue ended up being is that the ending was unsatisfying for 2 reasons. The first being that the major themes within here are like tragedy and feminism, and tragedy is really just like leaning into the Greek retelling. Most Greek myths are tragedies. If you didn't know that, sorry to break it to you, none of them are happy. Zeus is a major dick. So go into all Greek retellings just knowing that probably not good things are happening. But I don't think Jennifer Saint interacted enough with either the themes of feminism or the themes of tragedy to make the ending feel satisfying emotionally to me as a reader. And I also felt like when we reached the ending that there were gaps in the character development, and I was just sort of like, how did we get here? Why are the characters making this decision? I felt like I was moving with these characters through this story, watching them grow, watching them learn and change, and then they just skipped ahead in their development all the way at the end, and I was just like, I can't suspend my belief here. Like, I don't get it. I don't get why these characters are acting this way. That skip in the character development combined with the lack of interaction fully with the themes. I mean, the themes are there. She interacts with them, but like not enough. Although the themes are very present and obviously she does interact with them, it wasn't enough to make the emotional payoff what it could have been. This book could have been beautiful and tragic and hopeful, and it could have made you feel so very empowered and strong. I just didn't get that emotional payoff that the book could have had and that I thought the book was heading towards. And so, yes, honestly, this is a good, solid book. I think that there are people that this could be a favorite of all time for them. It just fell a little flat for me personally. Okay, so I have 3 books left to talk about, and they are books in my current obsession, which is the Blood Grace series. So I'm going to kind of talk about them collectively. I read Blood Sanctuary Part 1 and 2 in April, and then I finished up Blood Union Part 1 in the first couple of days of May. This series is my new obsession. It is a fantasy romance, heavy on the romance part, and it is just bringing me so much serotonin. It is making me so happy. This series brings me so much joy. I think I'm just gonna hold up Blood Sanctuary Part 1. This is book 3 in the series, so this is 3, 4, 5 that I am talking about now. This is a series that follows Cassia, who is the bastard daughter of the king of her country, and the king is real shit. And then it also follows Leo. This is a dual POV story, and Leo is a Hesperine, which is a vampire. Leo is an apprentice diplomat, and he is put in an envoy, and they go to visit Cassia's country in order to have peace talks. There is a lot of fear of the humans in this world because I mean, they are vampires, they do drink blood, but there's just like a lot of false information circulating. But Cassia is not afraid, and she has some questions that she needs answered, so she kind of arranges to meet up with Leo, and the two of them talk and they form a really cute friendship, and then that friendship does evolve into a romantic relationship, and it's just so cute and sweet and it's so endearing, and I love both of them together so very much. So in this series, book 1 kind of like concludes at like a really good point, and then books 2 through 4, while they do pick up the storyline, they kind of are their own story arc. And then in Blood Union Part 1, we are starting a new story arc. So at the end of book 4, which is Blood Sanctuary Part 2, we have an entire wrap up to a storyline, and then this one starts a whole new story arc for Cassia and Leo. This series is just pure escapism. The romance is so cute and so endearing. I'm constantly smiling when I'm reading this. I get butterflies. I also really enjoyed this series because while I went into it knowing that it was going to be predominantly romance, I think the plotline is excellent. The fantasy plotline of this story is excellent. Again, it's very political, which is something that I love, but I just think that Bella Roth really took her time and she really plotted out where this story was going to go, and you can really truly tell. I genuinely think the fantasy plotline stands up completely on its own. It is fully fleshed out. It is excellently paced in my opinion. I just think it's good. I can't stop raving about this series. Bella Roth also put like so much care into her world building, and it really shows. I love world building. I think it is very important to a fantasy series. Honestly, you can just tell that Bella Roth cares so much about this story, and she put so much work and energy and love into it. The world feels real. The characters feel three-dimensional. Like, I feel like I know Cassia, I know Leo as humans. Well, people. Leo is not human. I love this series. It's so good, and I highly recommend it. So yeah, there are all the 8 books that I read in April, and also a bonus 9th book that I finished up at the beginning of May. I had such a good reading month. It was amazing. I'm so happy to be reading so many things that I love. Thank you so very much for spending time here with me today. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I hope you stay safe this week. I hope you stay hydrated, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye!